Hey, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, wherever you may be around this great world, country of ours, and on this awesome Tuesday night. Listen, my name is Mitch Bell. Everybody calls me Taco. I'm the host of Tall Tales with Taco. Tonight is going to be fun. There is a certain aspect to flying airplanes that makes it inherently dangerous and the most exciting thing you've ever done. And I've got to say, that is tail wheel flying. Now, on top of that, tail wheel flying, what is the hardest thing that you could ever dream of doing? Well, that's tail wheel flying up in Alaska. I mean, when they talk about bush country, there is so much life or death decisions that happen instantaneously in that arena. And tonight, I'm very fortunate to have a buddy of mine, Clint Macarthur, who's a pilot with me at my airline, flies a 737. He came over from TWA and he lives in Alaska. And the first time we flew together, he pulls out this fresh salmon that he had just smoked. He caught it, smoked it, brought it down with him on the airplane, and we ended up having it for dinner. And it's cemented just a great friendship. And I've flown with him after that, and it's just been awesome. And I asked him to come on the show because his tales of Alaska flying is phenomenal. And without further ado, I'd like to bring Clint on. How you doing, brother?
Hi, Mitch. You sound like you're talking like real slow. I'm not sure. It's almost coming in a little bit muffled. I'm not sure what's going on with the audio.
Can you hear me now?
So I can hear you, but it's coming in like you're talking like Fred Munster from the. Not sure exactly why. I don't know if it's on my settings or not.
Well, I tell you what.
Let's proceed.
Try your other headpiece. Put the other one in.
Yeah, I tried the other earpiece, and for some reason it's still coming in. Hold on a second.
Have them both in. Now, how's it sound?
Yeah. Um, Let me double check here. I'm going to just check my settings real quick.
Sure. Well, while you're doing that, folks, if you ever get a chance and you start talking about bush pilot flying, my first exposure to Alaska was coming in on a C-130 years ago. Basically, we went from Cherry Point. They gave us a credit card. It was in October. And they said, go fly 30 or 40 hours. And so we literally went and pinned stuff. Who wants to go where? Who's got family members? And we went all these different places until we ended up in Alaska. And then once we got to Alaska, they were sitting there talking about the Great Alaskan Bush Company. And they were talking about how much money they were going to lose up in the Great Alaskan Bush Company. And I'm thinking kind of like an outdoors place. Can you hear me? I tell you what, Clint, we're having just a little bit of problem. Clint, can you hear me? Can you hear me? Yes or no? Um, let's try something here. This is we had it working earlier, and I apologize, folks. That's what happens sometimes, and we just literally had it all working out. Let me see if I can't get him. Okay, can you hear me now? Take your earbuds out. Turn your Bluetooth off. Turn your Bluetooth off on your iPad. Clint, you're killing me, man. Turn your Bluetooth off.
All
Hey,
right.
I
How
can
do
hear
you
you.
hear me, Mitch?
All right, I got you now.
Yep, it's still the same. Gosh, I don't know what happened.
Yeah, no, I hear you.
All right. Well, let's try this.
No. Don't do anything different. I hear you. Don't do anything different. I can hear you. So can everybody else. All right. So going back, you can hear me, right?
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yeah. No, it's still coming in bad. I'm not sure why.
Okay, go ahead and turn your Bluetooth off and just use the microphone on your iPad.
Okay.
Oh man. You have your microphone muted. All I want you to do is turn your Bluetooth off. Well, we're waiting for Clint to get up. Let me show you some incredible photographs. That is a young kid named Will. Will, his family friends, they had asked me if I knew anyone that lived up in Alaska that actually could teach him to be a bush pilot. And I actually got the two of them together. They got all hooked up, and it was just a fantastic deal. Now he lives up there, works for one of the companies, preparing airplanes, and he's got all his ratings and he's starting to fly. So he is living the dream. And folks, this hasn't happened in a long time not to have the audio work, and it was working before. Maybe the video that I did with Reed Lance Rosenthal right at the last minute. Uh, boy, oh boy. It was going to be a great episode tonight. And I'm not sure if I'm going to get Clint back, but I can tell you right now, Clint, there you go. I can hear you.
All right, Mitch. I don't know that it's going to correct itself. I think I've tried everything over on this.
Can you talk as we're sitting here talking back and forth? You can hear me?
Protection. AirPods. Blue. Yep. Left AirPod.
Left AirPod, right AirPod. Everybody, just give us a couple minutes. It's going to come back. Scott Johnson,
Yep.
greetings from Anchorage, Alaska. Outstanding. Ed Fitzmaurice.
Yep.
Fitz, great seeing you. Okay, you can hear me. So as we continue,
Mitch, I don't know what the problem is. I can't correct on this. Yep. I don't know if it had something to do with when you had the intro. I tapped on the intro because I wanted to listen to the intro, and then as soon as I did that, it came in really muffled.
but you can hear me now.
Front camera. I've gone to audio, mic volume. There. Try that.
Yeah, I'm talking to you.
Sorry about that, Mitch. Go ahead. Let's start with the questions. I'll try and muster through it.
So you can hear what I'm saying to you.
I can hear you, but it's not real good audio. No. Yeah.
Okay. I want you to turn your Bluetooth off and don't use the earbud on your iPad. Turn it off on your iPad. Try that.
Okay. Yeah. I've tried turning it off. Yeah, both on my phone.
I think, folks, we're going to have to come back with Clint another time. It was working. Something happened. We try to get together about 20 minutes before showtime and make sure everything works good, and it did. Bit frustrating. So, with that being said, what do you guys want to talk about tonight? Put it in the comments. We'll talk. Throw anything you want in there, and we will bring it up for conversation tonight on Tall Tales with Taco. Let's see. Are you working now? Can you hear me now? Clint is in Fort Worth, Texas right now. And he has a place out here that he flies in. Ukrainian armor. How well does it work commuting in from Alaska? I don't know if he's even able to read that. He's got his microphone muted there. Okay, Clint. They asked, how well does it work commuting from Alaska? I can tell you that it's a long trip coming down. He's got a couple different options, which is pretty interesting, and he seems to make it work. But boy, best laid plans of mice and men. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I was afraid of this.
Well, this is going to go down into my annuals
No.
of worst show ever. Prior planning, I thought we had it good, and that just absolutely sucks. So I can sit here and talk bad about Clint. He can't hear me. Joe Harrison, get some taco. Damn Skippy, man. Improvise, adapt, overcome, right? Ah, man. If I could only tell him. He just backed out of the whole thing. So we'll see if he can re-enter on the link. Somebody asked about armor, Ukrainian stuff going on. Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yeah, it's still doing the same thing. I don't know why. So let's just go with the questions and I'll try and muster through it.
How well does it work commuting from Alaska?
How long have I been working in Alaska or been in Alaska?
Yeah, yeah. That sounds good.
Uh,
Go with that.
so I went to Alaska in 2002 when I was furloughed from American Airlines. I got there about a month after I was furloughed, about November. I got there the very last American Airlines flight, which I think was October 31st of 2002. I had gotten a job flying there. I got hired over the phone for a company called Cape Smythe Airways, and we flew all over the North Slope, is what they refer it to, but it's the north coast from almost Canada all the way down to Kotzebue and then down into Nome. And I was flying Beech 99s and Cessna 207s. And I was pretty it was a pretty strong introduction, if you will, to Alaska. I had very little, if no, cold weather experience, no mountain flying to speak of, really, other than a mountain flying checkout in Colorado one time, and no real scud running experience. So I was, I think, probably about a week after I got there. I think the lowest temperature I saw was probably minus 35 or minus 45, probably within about a week after I got there. So.
And how long did it take you to do all of that? Get checked out.
It took a little bit longer than I hoped to get checked out. I think I got checked out and was flying in the left seat probably about 3-4 weeks. They just couldn't spare anybody to do my training. So I hoped to get checked out within a week or two, but it took about 3 or 4 weeks. I can't remember exactly how long. But I saw my first polar bear going into a small village of Koktovik. Um, and that was at an old dew line site, detection early warning site. And we were in a Beech 99 and that was about a week and a half into me working for Cape Smythe. I was just sort of on an observation flight, flying co-pilot basically, and we were on short final. It was clear out, and there was a ridge that was running almost parallel to our final approach path, and we got down to about 100 feet, and a polar bear ran out from the coast line. I guess he maybe had a seal in sight or something like that, and he saw the plane coming, and he just bolted out, and it was pretty exciting for me. The interesting thing about Koktovik is being on a dew line site right on the north coast of I think it's not the Beaufort, but the Chukchi Sea up there. I may have gotten it wrong, but they the hangar, the old hangar from the military, the door is open. The big hangar door is open, and so the natives of the village of Koktovik leave it open all the time, and they used to store their boats in there. And sometimes the polar bears would go in there and hang out. Well, we parked right in front of the hangar, and so I asked the guy I was flying with, I was like, well, what's to prevent the polar bear from coming out and like chewing on one of us? And he said, really sort of nothing, because there's no fences around the airport, no nothing. So I always made sure I had my 45 with me
Yeah.
ever since that. Yeah, exactly. So anyways, yeah.
Did you ever have to, when you're flying up there, did you ever have to pull a gun on anybody?
Yeah, so I think it was about a year after I got there. I may be off on my timing. That it used to be required that if you were flying Part 135, moving people around from village to village, you were required to have a handgun on you. But they changed that at some point. Like say, I think it was either right when I got there, about a year after I got there, to it was voluntary to carry a gun around with you. And then later on, when I flew medevac, it was we had to be careful because we had to medevac to Canada. Canada doesn't like you to have, or you're not supposed to have a gun with you. And most of the medevacs I flew in, we had a rifle, a small rifle, a survival rifle with us. So we always had to make sure that we removed the rifle before we did any medevacs to Canada. So yeah.
Yeah, but that's, I mean, you got to have it in case you crash. In case you crash, you got to have a gun if you go down. You know what I mean?
Right, a survival gun, or you always save the last bullet for yourself, because the last thing you want to do is, have your last sort of vision is bear chewing on you. So you pump all the rounds you can into the wolf or a bear, and then save the last one for you. I'm a little bit joking there, but maybe not. So um, yeah, I see a picture there. That was. A place down Silver Salmon Creek. It's across the inlet from Homer, and we've been down there and gone fishing before in my own personal Super Cub. So,
But that there's a bear over there. He just ignore you, leave you alone.
it was yeah, that was a different bear. There was a much larger one that actually, that very same picture. If you look at that, there's sort of a sandbar or a gravel bar in the middle of the river. That same day, I was fishing, and we had a bear was down there. I hooked into a fish pretty quickly, about 15 minutes after I was there, and then believe it or not, he could hear the fish splashing around in the water
Mhm.
from all the way down there. And he stood up on his hind legs and could see that there was a fish splashing around in the water. And he took off running in our direction. And my friend that's in that picture, Charles McMurrow, he used to fly for American Eagle. And I told him, I said, open that canister. There's a bear proof canister that we had. and he didn't know how to open it, and he's sitting there struggling with it, and the bear took off running in our direction at full speed. He was about a football field length, maybe a football field length and a half, and he was moving as fast as he probably could. So I think bears his side can they can move at about 30 miles an hour, I'm guessing, roughly. And he was just hooking, coming straight towards us. And Charles, he saw the bear coming towards him, and then he threw down the canister and took off running. In the meantime, I'm still trying to land the fish, and I sort of had my back a little bit to the bear, and I I turned around. I finally got my finger in the fish's gills, and then turned around and saw Charles run in the other direction, and then I sitting there standing around with a fish in my hand and a bear running towards me, and because
Did
I
you have
had
to pull
all
your
my
gun out, or what did you do?
yeah I had my 45. It's a shoulder holster, so I had it down here. I had a backpack on. I had my fishing gear on. I had a fillet knife on, and so people said, "Well, why didn't you just toss them the fish?" Well, I didn't want the bear to have my fish, so I just tossed the fish out as far as I could, so that when the fish sort of hit the end of the line was nice and tight. And I reached over and I grabbed my fillet knife, and in one fell swoop, just sort of cut the fishing line because it was nice and tight, obviously. And right about that time, the bear came to a complete stop, and he's about 15 feet away from me, and he is just like a dog, really. He just sort of watched the fish swim away, and then he sort of looked up at me like, "Why'd you let our fish go?" And it was it was really exciting. It was probably the most one of the most exciting 30 seconds of my life. It seemed like it lasted like a lifetime, but it was really exciting. Yeah, and that was another trip. Brian Smith there flies for American Airlines. He's based out in Charlotte right now, and that was on my very first float trip, my only float trip in Alaska. So we floated, him and myself and my wife floated down the Salmon River out in southwest Alaska for 4 days. So we had a Cessna 207 drop us off out in the bush, and we assembled what they call a cataract, and then floated down. Didn't see anything man-made for like 3.5 days until the last day
Wow.
of our float trip. Yeah.
Those are some big
So
paws right there.
yeah,
Those are
yeah,
big paws. Now, I
yeah.
love this shot. Is that your house up there or your cabin?
That's our cabin. Yeah, it's a cabin and our little Argo right there. That's actually on the frozen lake right in front of the cabin. Yeah. So it's uh,
Yeah, what is
uh,
that?
that's an Argo. ARGO, an Argo. Yeah,
That's cool
and
as hell.
you drive it just like a tank. You can see it's got two little. If you look real close, it's got two little handlebars there. So and
Yeah.
it drives around. It's not the best thing in the world on snow, but you really have to have a snow machine to get around pretty good. So, but it lays good tracks.
Is
So
it
yeah.
amphibious as well? Can it go into the water or no?
It's a lot of hunters use those Argos to get around in the late fall to hunt moose
Mhm.
because it can traverse tundra, and it can go through sort of small, shallow creeks. Uh, I actually did drive it into the lake right in front of the cabin one time just to see how it would handle, and it was. I'm lucky I didn't get too far from the edge of the lake because it just sort of wallered around, and the you can't really steer it or anything like that. So it really needs some tris. And it was a little bit nose heavy, so yeah, that's Will Leby.
Yeah.
That was first salmon that he ever caught. That was gosh, I think that was this summer. So yeah, you introduced me to him. So
That is cool. I appreciate you taking care of that young man. We were talking about a lot of the dangers up there and the things that can happen. Talk about what happened in this photograph of the airplane you see sitting down there. Can you talk
uh,
about?
yeah, I can talk about this. So this picture right there was a guy that came out, and what he was trying to do is he was trying to um, he was trying to set some traps or check some traps. He was trapping at the very beginning of January of that year, and I think that was like 3 years ago. So
Mhm.
almost 3 years, no, maybe a little bit further, maybe 4 years ago. And he, I think, was sort of new to ski flying. I don't know his experience level, but I did talk to him. And I think what happened was he landed late in the day. He had the sort of the worst kind of skis you can have on a small plane. Um, and he had what they call penetration skis. And I
Mhm.
won't go into the details about penetration skis, but they're just not designed as well as either straight skis or what they call wheel skis. So their flotation is not real good. And what happened is just a few days before he landed, even though we had about 5 or 6 feet of real good base, the temperatures dropped really steeply, if you will, and got very cold. It got down to about minus 35, minus 40. And what that does to the snow up there is it sucks out all the moisture, and so what would have been, 5 feet of base turned into just 5 feet of powder. And so when he landed, he didn't bother to do any touch and goes. If you look at his tracks, he just came in and landed, and then tried to take off when he realized the plane had sunk right down to the almost to the ground, really, and he couldn't take off. His skis had no flotation. It was late in the day. Um, I found out later, I was at the cabin. My wife and I were at the cabin, and I found out when we got back to town. Uh, we flew out to the cabin on January 1st. He landed there on January 2nd, and to check his traps or to lay traps. And then he got rescued on January 3rd. But by the time his wife, he had a thing called an in reach. You wear it on your shoulder, like just like the police wear a comm on their shoulder there.
Right.
And so he was able to talk to his wife. I think not directly, but like via satellite text message, and saying he was in trouble. His wife then called a friend of mine who is a sales rep for a helicopter company called Rotax Alaska, and then they were saying she was saying, "Hey, can you go rescue my husband or
Right. Stuck out
extract
there.
him?"
Yeah.
Basically, yeah. And basically, what happened is my buddy said, "I can't do it. Can't send my pilot out there at night, in
Yeah.
the mountains." But my friend Clint is his cabin's about 4 miles away from where your husband's at. So if he wants to try and snowshoe over there, there'll be a nice warm cabin. But it's a good thing he didn't, because with the snow being having no base, trying to snowshoe over there 4 miles probably would have killed him from exposure.
Sure.
So he spent the night. Not the He also had the option of calling the Air Guard, and they can fly out in the mountains in pave hawks with night vision goggles, which is what he should have done. But he chose to spend the night thinking that the Air Guard would charge him for a rescue. And when he woke up, or I'm sure he didn't sleep very well that night, the next morning he was in trouble. He couldn't feel his feet, he couldn't feel his hands, couldn't feel his fingers or legs or anything, but he was able to manage to tap out a message and tell his wife to send the Air Guard. and they came out in a pave hawk and landed, picked him up, and saved him. So,
Did he lose any fingers or toes or anything? Nose?
um, so it was his plane sat in that exact same spot for about, I'm going to say, 3 weeks. I do think he might have spent a couple of days in the hospital and then recovered back at home. I'm not sure exactly how many days. And then eventually he got another company to helicopter his airplane. They came and hooked up cables, lifted the airplane up, and then they dropped it down right in front of my cabin. And I knew that this was going to happen, so I flew out there and met him, and we had a little runway that was we had groomed a runway, if you will. You take a chain link fence and you just drag it behind the snow machine, and it packs
Mhm.
down the snow. So we had a runway there, and then he preheated his airplane after sitting out there for 3 weeks, and I talked to him a little bit. I certainly didn't want to make him feel bad about his situation, but I was glad he was good. And yeah, I think he burnt off just some of his fingertips. I think he lost the tip of his nose. Not so much that it didn't grow back, but
Right.
just like the tip of it came off. I think the tips of some of his fingers came off. So
Yeah, he did
yeah,
have that frostbite then.
yeah,
Yeah.
frostbite. Yeah.
How about this? How about this picture?
So that
W-
happened. uh, One of the companies, and I'm not going to bother to try and say which. I'm pretty sure I know which, but certainly I don't want to. What happened was they had some tourists in an airplane back about, gosh, that's 4 or 5 years ago, um, and they were doing a flight seeing tour out of Talkeetna, and they he was up near Denali, giving them a view of the tallest mountain in North America, and we think, I don't want to get myself in trouble or anybody else, but think that he was doing some trying to get dodge some clouds around 10. That airplane crashes at about 10,500 feet up in
Jeez.
the Alaska range, just on the south side of Denali,
So
and
will eventually will
he
the snow calve off and the airplane will be down at the base, or will it just be stuck up there forever?
yeah, he struck the mountain at 10,500 feet, and we think that the Air Guard actually airlifted a guy on a rope down to check and see if there was any survivors. And by the time they had to wait, like I think a day and a half, the pilot was able to actually get off a radio call, two radio calls, I believe. He must have still had power to his radios after he struck the mountain. He was in bad condition, and there was probably a couple of people that were still alive at first, but they perished. And the
That's
Air
awful.
Guard, they found that it was just too dangerous to recover the aircraft. That at that altitude is pretty precarious. They weren't willing to risk, uh, you know, somebody dying in trying to
Sure.
recover the aircraft. So the aircraft just stayed there. So yeah,
So, I mean,
pretty
as I
tragic.
talked about in the beginning, Alaska is the real flying. I mean, you can take off and you scud run. If you're not familiar with the area or the valleys, you could hit a side of a mountain easily. Or if you got to put down, you got to deal with bears. You have to deal with, animals attacking you. Do you have a tent? Do you have stuff that'll warm you up? Oh,
Uh, yeah, I think I know what you're asking. Um, Alaska is just so unique in weather. Um, you're trying to fly in the mountains. You're trying to fly, at 10,500 feet. Uh, who knows how many different scattered layers you might go through, broken layers. And you're not, certainly don't want to put yourself at risk or anybody else, but it's just such a unique environment to operate in, that you try to find ways to get the job done, whether you're flying tourists around for flight seeing,
Mhm.
or you're moving, villagers around from village to village. Um, Part 135. I'll give you an example. We used to, uh, uh, when I was based out in Antioch for my second company, Frontier Flying Service,
Mhm.
uh, if I took off in the Navajo or the Chieftain and flew over the valley into the Yukon River Valley and flew into villages like Holy Cross or Anvik or Grayling or Shagaluk, these are all names of villages I used to go to all the time. I could shoot GPS approaches to almost all of those
Mhm.
villages, but the village approach, being just a straight GPS approach, might get me down to 550 or 450 feet.
Mhm.
Um, and then I could, if I wanted to, I could take off and pick up an IFR clearance and shoot an approach to the next village, um, and then do the same thing, climb up and then pick up a clearance and do all of these clearance through radio, 122.6 or something like that. Get a clearance to take off and say yes, your airspace is clear and you can take off, and then pick up your clearance on this center frequency, and then fly over to the next village and then get clearance to shoot a GPS approach to that village. Or I could fly to a village, shoot an approach, get under the overcast, and then all day long just move around from village to village, under that overcast at,
Mhm.
500 feet.
Mhm.
And a lot of the villages that may seem strange, but when the villages are only 3.5 minutes or 5 minutes apart, you're flying 10 miles, 15 miles. And if the visibility is good underneath, why go up above the overcast, spend all
Yeah.
day long trying to get approaches and shoot approach after approach after approach, when you can just get underneath the overcast and go from village to village to village, get everything
So
done. And
what are you carrying when you're going from village to village? What do you take? Do you take, Annie Sue Eskimo over to see Grandpa Eskimo? I mean, what are you hauling around when you go around to all these places?
well, a typical flight for me when I was at Frontier Flying Service, I might take Villagers from Antioch, which was, they had about, I think Antioch had about 5,000 foot paved runway, which was
Mhm.
unique. It's a larger village. It had about 800, maybe 1,000 people in the village of Antioch. And it was sort of a base of operations for us. But you would move villagers, you would move bypass mail for the villages. You would move, I mean, you might be bringing them stuff as mundane as, soda pop, or you know, just everyday, stuff to live off of. And you might be bringing somebody from one of the villages back to Antioch so that they could travel to Anchorage. So there was a lot of, if you will, commerce. Sometimes we'd bring hunters out. A lot of times in these small villages, they hire teachers to, come and teach the kids. A
Yeah.
lot of times we'd get sort of teachers that were straight out of college, and the state of Alaska would help pay off the tuition that they had accrued while they were getting their teaching certificates. So it was an attractive thing for teachers to come out there and teach these kids in these small villages, because they could pay off their tuition a lot quicker.
What
So, yeah.
what do people do to make money out in these small places?
How do the villagers make money?
Yeah.
Uh, well, they might, for instance, some of them would be guiding. So if it was hunting season,
Mhm.
hunters would pay big money to come out and pay a villager to guide them on a moose hunt or a bear hunt or whatnot. They were living off of the land. They might go out and um, catch salmon and then
Mhm.
store up the salmon for the winter. There's not a lot of commerce out there in these villages other than maybe guiding for hunts or fishing.
Right.
Yeah, so it's yeah. That picture you just showed, that is me and a couple of friends. The red Super Cub is obviously mine. The gray and maroon airplane is a Mackie SQ2. I believe that has a 200 horsepower constant speed prop. Kevin was flying that day. He's at American Airlines, Kevin Anderson. He saved my life one time. Very grateful to him. And then the tan airplane in the background is owned by a gentleman by the name of Art. And that's a SQ4. That's a very unique airplane. That's a
Is that on wheels
250
or
horsepower.
is that on wheels or skis?
So my plane and the plane that Kevin's flying are on straight skis, and then Art's plane, the tan one in the background, is on what you call wheel skis. So wheel skis, you have either a hydraulic pump or a hydraulic manual pump, or in most cases an electronic pump or electric pump that'll it will push the skis down when you
Okay.
want to land on snow, and then it'll raise the skis up when you want to land on wheels. So it's got, if you will, it's got holes for the wheels to
Okay.
penetrate the skis. Yeah.
And how
So
high are
yeah,
you guys out there? What sort of
we
elevation?
are. Yeah, we're at 45 or 4,600 feet on the Triumvirate Glacier. And we had a real low cloud deck right there. The clouds that you see sort of skirting the tops of that mountain right behind us are only probably about 300 feet above us. And that is looking almost directly west, that picture right there.
It's
And
amazing.
yeah, we're just out having fun, playing around. And yeah, it's really fun. Yeah.
Now, you do have a heater in your airplane, right?
What's that?
You have a heater in your airplane when you're up flying around?
A heater in the airplane?
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, it's not much of a heater. It heats my right foot. That's about the extent of the heater in the airplane. So you just dress for it. If I'm not sure what the temperatures were on that day. I've flown my airplane. You know, I really don't like to. I think if you look in most piston uh, the manual for the limitations on most piston aircraft, and it'll generally say about minus 38 degrees Fahrenheit for the minimum operating temperature. I've had my airplane in minus 36. I really don't like to operate it in those temperatures. And generally, when that's happened, it's happened when I've flown from Anchorage out to my cabin,
Mhm.
and it's sort of the temperature difference has caught me by surprise a few times, and it's strange because when you get temperatures that cold, it's usually a pretty bad inversion. So if I take off from Anchorage and it's minus 10, I'll fly out to my cabin, and if I'm at 1,000 feet, which is pretty high for my Super Cub, we
Mhm.
generally don't get very high at all. If I'm in, and then I descend that last 600 feet, that's when you'll hit the inversion. And if you're not watching the temperature, outside temperature gauge, then by the time you land, it's minus 34, minus 35, minus 36, which is exactly what's happened both times I got out to my cabin and got stuck in really cold weather. The gentleman I was talking about that got stuck out in his airplane
Mhm.
when the really cold temperatures hit just after New Year's some years ago. I know that when I got out there, it was minus 23,
Mhm.
and that was the minus 20 the first day, the first night, and then the next night, the night that he got stuck, it was minus 33 at my cabin, and where he got stuck, it's in a little bit of a valley. It's even lower than where my cabin is, and it tends to get from talking to my buddy who traps. You probably got a picture of my friend that traps a little bit. Yeah, that's Lee. He said that that little valley gets about 5 to 10 degrees even colder when we get those
Jeez.
really cold snaps. So the guy who got stuck was probably stuck in minus 38 or colder temperature. So yeah, he was
Well,
in real bad way.
even if if he survived the night with no issues, the guy that got stuck, there's no way his engine oil would have been frozen that he could have even taken off the next day, right?
I'm not really understanding what you're asking. Something about the heat, how
Engine
he can
engine
stay
oil.
warm.
Engine oil.
Oh, the engine oil. Yeah. So a trick that I've been told about, I've only had to use it once, which is using the engine oil to so the old bush pilots, from what I understand, if they got stuck somewhere, whether it be in the dead of winter when there's only 4 or 5 days of daylight, and fog rolled in real quick, or they got stuck in deep snow or whatever, if they wanted to keep their engine oil warm, they would empty the oil into a bag,
Mhm.
some kind of plastic bag, generally, and then keep the oil in their coat with them. And then, therefore, the oil would keep them warm, and
Right.
then they would also, in return, keep the engine oil warm as well. Then the next day, the sun comes up, the fog burns off, whatever, for whatever reason. They've been able to pack down a runway with their snowshoes if they were in deep snow. And then they take the oil and then they pour it back into the engine. And then you pull the prop through, about a dozen times to sort of
Mhm.
loosen everything up. And then hopefully, if your battery allows you, isn't completely frozen, then you sit there and hit the starter, and hopefully your engine will start up. So yeah, I've only had to do that once. So yeah.
Scary. Well, you were
So
talking about your friend saved your life. What happened on that instance? The guy saved your life in the middle airplane. He saved your life. Can you hear me?
my friend that saved my life, is that what you're asking about?
Yeah.
Uh,
Story.
yeah. So Kevin, I had met him. A the Was it either that summer or the summer before? I had had an engine failure out in the bush, and I had. I'm sorry, I'm probably going back a little bit too far. I'm just giving you a little bit of history. And when I had the engine failure, a friend of mine, Dave Bronson, who's now mayor in Anchorage, he was able to track down a guy. I had just bought the cabin the year before, and I was on floats to be able to get into my cabin. But most of the friends I had made prior to that, none of them were on floats, and so now I had to get a whole bunch of new friends that all had airplanes on floats. Well, Kevin had an airplane on floats, and he came out and brought out a new cylinder, and we made the repairs in the field. Basically, we took off the cylinder and then the cylinder exploded, and then we put on a new cylinder out there in the field, and that's how I met Kevin, basically. And
Wow.
this was right about the time that American and U.S. Airways bought American in out of our bankruptcy, and I took a little bit of the money that I got from that, and I bought a couple of real nice snow machines. Uh, you might in the lower 48 know them as snowmobiles, and uh, and so I had bought them, and I needed to transport them out to the cabin. And I didn't. I asked Kevin if he knew how to. He grew up in Montana, and So he agreed to help me drive him out to the cabin. And so we had to go 70 miles across the tundra. We crossed two major rivers, several smaller tributaries, and then finally got to the cabin. We had repositioned my Super Cub out there so that we'd stay the night at the cabin and the next day fly back to Anchorage.
Uh-huh.
Kevin was a little bit gung ho to go out and just play around. We brought a sled with some survival gear with us and some other things I needed out the cabin, so we didn't have much time to play around as we drove out to the cabin. We got there. We had a beer, just one beer, and I said, "Hey, you want to go up into the mountains and play around on snow machines? Go to the top of the mountain." And he was like, "Yeah, let's go do it." So we went down and around the corner, and I ended up sort of hopping over a deep creek. I didn't realize it as deep as it was. I had a problem with the throttle as well, and I just wasn't. In all honesty, I just wasn't that good of a snow machine driver or snowmobiler, and so I made a mistake basically and busted my leg pretty badly. I slid down into the only open part of the creek and almost got swept underneath the ice.
Holy
And
shit.
Kevin came back and he fished me out of the creek before I got swept under the ice, and then got me back to my cabin with the help of some people in another cabin. And then um, they got on the phone. Kevin had a sat phone, and he got on the phone to his wife. His wife was a EMT, and she got on the phone to the local medevac. The medevac didn't want to send a helicopter out at night in the mountains. Kevin convinced them to give him, he was a UPS pilot at the time. He's pilot now for American. And he convinced them to give him the pilot's phone number. So he called the pilot directly, from what I understand. And then when he got the pilot on the phone, he said, "Listen, I can see the lights of Anchorage over top of the other mountain here. It's VFR here. I don't know what the weather is in Anchorage. My friend's got to get to a hospital tonight." And the pilot asked him, "Well, how do you know the ice on the lake is thick enough?" He said, "A DC-3 landed out here 3 times today, dropping off building supplies. So if a DC-3 can land out here on skis, I'm sure the ice is thick enough." And then they also circled some snow machines. So when the helicopter got there, they had the landing zone. They had the landing zone lit up with the headlights of the snow machines. They landed. They came in, triaged me, took me down with the snow machines. They put me in the little sled and took me
Uh-huh.
down to the helicopter, loaded me in, and then they got me back to town. And it saved my life, literally, in in the most literal definition of saving somebody's life.
That's cool.
And I would have lost my leg had I been delayed. The doctor said if I'd gotten there 3 hours later, he would have cut my leg off. So, yeah.
Not
So,
good. Not good. This is a great shot here. I love this with the little tiny
yeah,
gal on the big tires.
yeah, that's Ellen. Ellen Berry. She is a pilot with the Air Force. I believe she's a captain now on C-17s. And I was introduced to her by another female pilot, Air Force grad, and so I was doing tailwheel checkouts basically in my Super Cub, and it was interesting to fly. That is a friend named Laura. She used to work at the pub that my wife and I went. She uh, she convinced me to take her up for a flight. That was probably about 3, 4 years ago, I think.
That's beautiful. Is
So
that a house? Is that your house or out
uh,
there?
no, that's at Lake Hood, and the little shed right behind it is just a shed to store, anything that you might need, fuel, oil. That picture is of a wolverine. My buddy Lee Snowberger, he let me come along with him on one of his trapping runs.
Uh-huh.
And we probably traveled 30, I think it was like 32 or 35 miles by snow machines. And we must have checked probably about, I don't know, 20 traps.
Yeah.
And that wolverine was, I think, in the very last trap that we checked, and he was still alive. I'm a little bit of an environmentalist, and I don't really care to see animals killed unless they're going to go into my freezer. I'm not a big trophy hunter, but I've never seen an animal more pissed off in my life.
Yeah,
That
I bet.
wolverine was still alive, and Lee doesn't. He used to build cabins for a living, but he's pretty much retired from that. And so when we pulled up to that wolverine, um, it's really hard to describe, but he was on a paw trap. I don't want to
Mhm.
get too graphic here, but um, and he must have been trapped for about a day, but and it had a cable that was wrapped around a tree that must have been 2.5 feet at the base, and he had mowed down everything like somebody had taken a lawnmower and mowed it completely clean, um, in about a 6 to 8 foot radius of the base of that tree. It
Wow.
was pretty amazing. Yeah. So
Well, how about this?
uh,
There's on skis.
that's Megan Cohane. Her dad is a pilot at American, and Megan was also a Air Force grad. I believe she's a C-17 pilot now as well. And she was the one that introduced me to Ellen and a few other people from the Air Force that came out and did their tailwheel sign-offs with me. Yeah.
That's really cool that you
So,
do that. Um, I do
yeah.
have some questions for you. Let's show this. John Wilkinson, what kind of emergency survival gear do you carry on board for winter conditions? It's a good question. I was thinking the
Yeah.
same.
Yes. So I can see the stuff there. I carry flares. I carry some emergency food rations, and I try to change those out every uh, couple of years. I believe it or not, have a change of clothes, dry clothes. I have them vacuum sealed.
Mhm.
I have lighters, matches, signaling devices. I have mosquito netting for your head. I have mosquito spray. Gosh, there's a lot of stuff. It doesn't weigh quite 20 pounds, but I can fit a lot into just a small Adidas bag, basically. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah.
Went sledding in Willow, Alaska in January. Loved it. I bet that would be a blast.
Yeah.
And John, hey Taco, get me as close to that beer. I'd rather be off in the Fox. Yeah, yeah,
Fox
I
Hills. Yeah.
agree. Hey, this is a good question right
Yeah.
here. Scott Johnson, if you were to buy a tail dragger for a 16-year-old time build, what model
For
would you get?
16-year-old build time. Uh, so for a 16-year-old, I'd buy him something that is a stick. I would definitely suggest a stick. It's I hate to say it, they're just more fun to fly than a yoke.
Mhm.
And you don't have to go out and get them something like super expensive. Um, Heck, a J3 Cub, a Citabria 7 ECBC, something that is even a champ or a chief would be a great start. Something that's, I think most of those planes that I just mentioned are probably around 20,000, depending
Cub?
on the condition they're in. Yeah,
Yeah, I was gonna say
20,000,
Cub
dollars.
Cubs
Um,
Cubs are pretty expensive though, aren't they?
well, Super Cubs are, yeah, but not like a J3. A
Oh,
J3 is going to be like a 65 horsepower. But yeah, you don't want to stick a 16-year-old in a Super Cub and then have them go bend some metal. That because then you're going to be spending quite a bit more just to have them fix the airplane. But something I wouldn't say underpowered, but a 65, 84, 85 horsepower engine.
Yeah.
And then by the time he's, 19, 20, and he's got his commercial or instrument or something like that, and he really enjoys bush flying or tailwheel flying, then if he really wants to upgrade to some of the big boy stuff like a Super Cub or a Maul or even a Stinson with a IO 40 IO 450 or something like that, then he can upgrade then. So yeah.
What do you if somebody wants to go up to Alaska to learn how to be a bush pilot, is there a certain company or somewhere you would send them to learn how to fly up in those conditions?
I didn't quite get what you said there. Try again. There's something about the conditions.
Is is there a company, if you wanted to learn how to fly up there, is there a company you would send somebody to?
Yeah. I'm sorry. I'm not understanding.
Turn your volume up, maybe? Turn your volume up. Turn it up.
Turn it up.
Yeah.
Yeah, I got you all the way up. It's just the bad audio between you and I, Mitch. I don't know what. So
Uh,
um,
yeah.
yeah, I got the volume all the way up.
Yeah.
So
How about this? I'll ask this as I'm sitting here. Is there a company that you
yeah,
would recommend
yeah.
to learn to fly? Boy, this is crazy. Yeah. How about this?
You is there a company that you would recommend to learn to fly? Oh, you mean a bush flying
Yes.
company? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Well, I've got three that I could suggest. I do tailwheel sign offs, but it's mainly just for friends and when I got some time. Um, I sort of tend to steer people away from me doing their uh, uh, float plane rating just because it takes a little bit of time, and there's people that can do it more efficiently than I can. One of them is Alaska Floats and Skis up in Talkeetna, a guy that I flew with at my third company. His name is Don Lee in Talkeetna. If you just type in Don Lee
Hmm.
in Talkeetna or Alaska Floats and Skis, you'll pull it up. He's really super cool. You're going to feel at home. He's got sort of a crash house there for anybody who comes up and does float plane training with him. His place is right on the lake. Another one is Steve Williams with Acme Cub in Anchorage. Steve is right now refurbishing the floats for my float plane. He's actually got the FAA goes to him to do airplane rechecks in case somebody's had a crash or something like that. And then the last one is a guy by the name of Steve Williams, or not Steve Williams, uh, Vern Kingsford down in Moose Pass. And those are mostly float operations. At least Vern's place is. Steve Williams in Anchorage will teach you wheel skis or floats. And then Don Lee up in Talkeetna will teach you wheel skis or floats as well.
Very
So,
cool.
yeah, yeah.
Well, listen, thanks. I'm sorry the audio didn't work for you. I hope everybody got something out of this tonight. It's not how I intended it to go, but I certainly do appreciate you coming along with us and hanging out tonight, Clint.
Yeah, it was great talking to you. I apologize. I'm sure that I'm the one that messed up the audio somehow. Probably hit the wrong button somewhere, but I hope it came through on y'all's end.
I can
So,
I can hear you good. So anyway, you take care, and I'll talk to you later.
okay, we'll see you
Adios.
later. Take care. All right, bye.
All right, folks. Sorry about the audio issues there. Clint has some really good stories. I've spent hours in the cockpit on the flight deck with Clint as we would sit there cruise around the United States, and his stories were fantastic. There were actually quite a few that he did not even touch on because we did have that communication barrier, where I would have gotten him to spill the beans and tell some behind the scenes stories. But for those that hung out, I really do appreciate you hanging out and staying through that. That kind of threw me off my game, but look forward to having you next week. It will be much better, I promise. Until then, you guys, be safe, be fun, and I will do my little deal. Adios. Hasta luego. Auf Wiedersehen. Tschüss. Sheshini. Au revoir. Domo arigato gozaimasu. Tando. Shinde. Okudasai. Ciao. Arrivederci. Tashikor. Assalamu alaikum. Mahalo. Dobranish. Learned Swedish. Do. Hey do we? I think that was it. This Angera. I think that was Lithuanian. Pushin. Nos clear dono. Duvijania. Duvijania, Bosnian. I always like that. And Ukrainian, Bovai. And of course, for the Russians out there, Das Vidanya, Nostorovia. Anyway, take care and we'll see you next time. Until then, really appreciated it. We'll talk to you next Tuesday. Hoorah, Semper Fi.